Chapter 1. The Morning After Refusal. The morning after An Xue refused the crown prince, the capital woke before the sun. Servants ran through alleys with half-tied sashes. Tea houses opened their doors while the kettles were still cold. Noble carriages rolled slower than usual, not because the streets were crowded, but because every curtain hid someone listening. By dawn, the entire city knew one thing. Lady An Xue had rejected an imperial marriage decree in front of the emperor, the empress, the crown prince, and half the court. By breakfast, the city had decided 3 more things. She had bewitched Zhao Ming. The An family had grown arrogant because of its army. And poor second, Miss An Xue had been framed by a jealous cousin who could not bear to share the crown prince's favor. An Xue heard all 3 rumors before her porridge cooled. Shen Yu stood beside the table with a face like thunder. "My lady, should I send someone to beat the tea house clerks?" Madame Liang lifted her cup. "No." Dukan looked disappointed. "Not even one clerk." "No." "A very small beating." An Xue almost smiled. Her father had spent the night pacing outside her courtyard until Madame Liang threatened to lock him in the ancestral hall. Now, he sat at breakfast with dark circles under his eyes, one hand clenched around his chopsticks as if they were battlefield weapons. Madame Liang looked calm enough to make everyone nervous. "Rumors are birds," she said. "If you swing a sword at them, people only remember the sword." Dukan grunted. "On the border, birds stop flying when arrows are involved. This is not the border." "That is the problem." An Xue set down her spoon. "Mother is right, we cannot answer noise with anger." Her father turned to her at once. "Then how do we answer?" "With something heavier than noise." Madame Liang's eyes warmed by a fraction. In her first life, An Xue would have cried by now. She would have begged the crown prince to explain the rumors. She would have sent gifts to Empress Wei, hoping sincerity could soften suspicion. She would have written to Rulan and asked why her cousin had allowed such lies to spread. The memory made her stomach turn. Sincerity was a candle. The palace had always preferred knives. A steward entered and bowed. "My lord, my lady, a messenger from the Ministry of Justice waits outside." Dukan stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. "All ready." The steward swallowed. "It is Lord Shen Yu." Shen Yu blinked. "At this hour." An Xue looked toward the doorway. Shen Yu entered carrying his useless painted fan and wearing a pale gray robe that made him look as if he had wandered out of a library by mistake. Only his eyes ruined the act. They were too awake, too sharp, too amused by danger. He bowed to Dukan first. "Commander N." Dukan narrowed his eyes. "Door." Shen Yu paused. Madame Liang coughed into her sleeve. An Xue lowered her gaze to hide her smile. Shen Yu recovered with admirable dignity. "Today, I used one." "Continue doing that." "I shall attempt to survive the habit." He turned to An Xue, and the humor faded. "The palace has sealed An Rulan's cell. Officially, she is under examination for forged correspondence and collusion with Minister Han." Unofficially, An Xue asked. Unofficially, Empress Wei's attendants visited before the seal was placed. The room went quiet. Dukan's hand tightened. "They silenced her." "No," Shen Yu opened his fan. "Worse, they comforted her." An Xue understood at once. A dead Rulan could name no one. A comforted Rulan could still be useful. She could cry. She could confess only enough to wound the An family. She could pretend she had been tricked by servants, threatened by Duke N, or driven by An Xue's cruelty. Empress Wei had not abandoned her pawn. She had turned it around on the board. Shen Yu placed a folded paper on the table. "This is the official list of evidence taken from Rulan's room." Madame Liang reached for it, then stopped. "Why bring this to us?" "Because one item is missing." An Xue opened the paper. Letters, account slips, a hairpin box, a maid's confession, the copied northern ledgers, a small packet of medicine. She read the list twice. Then a cold line formed inside her chest. "The red lacquer letter case," she said. Shen Yu nodded. "The one mentioned by your maid Shen Yu during the banquet." Shen Yu went pale. "The case with the old letters." "It is not in the evidence room." Dukan struck the table, bowls jumped. "Who took it?" Shen Yu's fan covered half his face. That is the useful question. An Xue stared at the list. In the red lacquer case, Rulan had kept copies of sentimental letters. Most were harmless bait. A few were not. One, if An Xue remembered correctly, carried the name of a Ministry of War clerk who later died on the Northern Road. In her first life, that clerk's death had been used as proof that Duke An was secretly moving military funds. 3 years early, the same net was tightening again. An Xue folded the evidence list carefully. If the case is gone, someone wanted one letter removed before the Ministry of Justice could read it. Or inserted elsewhere, Shen Yu said. Madame Liang looked at her daughter. They mean to make us defend ourselves before we know the accusation. Then we do not wait for the accusation, An Xue said. Duke An straightened. Good, what do we attack? An Xue looked to Shen Yu. He smiled faintly, as if he had been waiting for that exact glance. A courier died last winter on the Northern Road, he said. The record says bandits. The body was burned too quickly. The receipt book from his courier station disappeared. An Xue's fingers chilled. You found it. Not yet. But you know where to look. Shen Yu tapped the fan against his palm. I know who lied about losing it. Outside, the capital continued waking into rumor. Inside the Yuan residence, An Xue felt the shape of the next battlefield settle around her. Last night, she had refused a prince. This morning, the empire had begun asking whether her family deserved punishment for surviving him. An Xue rose. Then we start before the palace does. Shen Yu's gaze rested on her face for one quiet second. Not pity, not admiration, not the hungry possessiveness Zhao Ming had mistaken for love. Recognition. As if he saw the blade she had become, and was careful not to touch the edge without permission. Lady An, he said, I hoped you would say that. Chapter 2, 3 rumors entered the capital. By noon, the first rumor had grown teeth. An Xue did not have to leave the residence to hear it. It came through vegetable sellers, fabric merchants, visiting stewards, and one terrified kitchen maid who swore she had only repeated what her aunt's neighbor's cousin had heard from a palace washerwoman. Lady An had used forbidden charms on the crown prince. That was why Zhao Ming had protected her at the banquet. That was why he had not denounced her for refusing the marriage decree. That was why he had allowed An Rulan, gentle and harmless An Rulan, to be taken into custody. Chunyi looked ready to bite someone. An Xue only asked, who profits from making me sound like a witch? Chunyi froze, the Empress. Partly. They stood in An Xue's study, where the shutters were half open to let in winter light. On the desk lay 3 sheets of paper. Each held one rumor written in An Xue's neat hand. 1, she had bewitched the crown prince. 2, that An family was too powerful to obey imperial grace. 3, Rulan had been framed. Chunyi leaned closer. Why partly? Because the Empress does not need everyone to believe I use charms. She only needs enough people to repeat it so the next accusation feels natural. What next accusation? An Xue dipped her brush in ink. That a woman who can confuse the air can also confuse her father into treason. Chunyi's face drained of anger. In her first life, the word treason had not arrived at once. It had come dressed in concern. People had whispered that Duke An was overprotective, then ambitious, then resentful, then dangerous. By the time imperial guards entered the residence, the capital had already rehearsed the family's guilt for months. This time, An Xue would not let the rehearsal begin unanswered. She wrote a 4th line beneath the rumors. Who carried them first? A servant announced visitors before Chunyi could speak. Madame Liang requests your presence in the Eastern Hall. 3 ladies have arrived. Chunyi frowned. 3, we canceled visitors. Not visitors, An Xue said, rising. Witnesses. Madame Liang had dressed in deep blue silk, a color too restrained for celebration and too elegant for grief. She sat in the Eastern Hall with 3 noblewomen. Madame Su of the censorate, old Madame Pei from a retired general's household, and Lady Gao, whose husband supervised grain transport. None of them were Empress Wei's closest allies. None were enemies either. That made them perfect. An Xue entered and bowed with measured grace. Old Madame Pei studied her openly. You look healthier than I expected. Should I apologize? The old woman barked a laugh, before remembering she had come to be serious. Madame Xu's eyes were sharp. The city speaks of you today. The city is generous with other people's lives. Lady Gao lowered her cup. They say second Miss An was taken crying. She often cries, Madame Liang said calmly. The question is whether tears are evidence. A faint silence followed. An Xue sat beside her mother, posture perfect, hands folded. In her first life, she had feared older noblewomen. They saw everything. They remembered everything. They smiled while measuring which family would rise and which would be stepped over. Now she understood that memory could be bought, guided, and sharpened. Madame Liang gestured to Chen Yu, who brought a lacquer tray. On it lay copies of harmless but useful documents: the dowry lock record, the physician's note about the poisoned hairpin, the list of evidence taken from Rulan's room, and Minister Han's public removal from the banquet. Not every secret. Only enough truth to make the rumors look childish. Madame Xue picked up the physician's note. This is official. Stamped this morning, Madame Liang said. Lady Gao examined the dowry lock record. You secured the dowry before the banquet. An Xue met her gaze. Before the engagement, I had reason to believe household accounts were being mishandled. Old Madame Pei snorted. Reason named in Rulan. Among others. Good, pretty tears annoy me. Madame Xue did not smile. Why show us this? An Xue answered before her mother could. Because by sunset, someone will tell you my family refused imperial grace out of arrogance. I hope you will remember that I refused after forged evidence, poison, and stolen dowry plans were exposed in front of the throne. The older women looked at her differently then. Not warmly. Warmth was not required. Accurate fear would do. Lady Gao set down the record, and if the palace asks why we visited. Madame Liang poured tea. You came to comfort an old friend after a difficult banquet. Old Madame Pei accepted a cup. I came because I was bored. Even better, Madame Liang said. An Xue lowered her eyes. For the first time that day, the tightness in her chest eased. Her mother had always understood war. She simply fought hers in rooms where men mistook tea for decoration. After the ladies left, Chen Yu returned with another message. My lady, someone from the Crown Prince's estate delivered a box. Madame Liang's face cooled. Duke En, who had been pretending not to listen from the corridor, stepped fully into view. Burn it. Father. Fine, open it first, then burn it. An Xue went to the front courtyard. The box was plain, dark wood, sealed with no ribbon and no flower. That alone made her pause. Zhao Ming had always sent beautiful things when he wanted to avoid difficult truths. Chen Yu opened it. Inside lay no jewels, no apology poem, no winter plum blossoms. Only a stack of copied memorials and a single note. An Xue unfolded the note. My mother will move through the censorate first. The accusation will not name your father. It will ask whether border commanders should be investigated after failed marriage alliances. No signature. No plea. No forgive me. At the bottom, one line had been added in a different pressure of ink. I will not ask you to trust me. Use what is useful. An Xue read it twice. Chen Yu whispered, Is it from His Highness? Yes. Do we believe him? An Xue looked at the 3 rumors on her desk through the open study door. Zhao Ming had finally learned not to arrive with flowers. That did not mean he had learned enough. We verify him, she said. Then we decide whether his warning is a gift, a trap, or both. That afternoon, 3 rumors entered the capital. By evening, An Xue sent 3 truths out to meet them. And somewhere inside the Eastern Palace, Crown Prince Zhao Ming waited to see whether the woman he had lost would use the first honest thing he had ever given her. Chapter 3. Rulan smiled inside her cell. And Rulan's cell did not look like a cell. That was the first warning. It had a bed with carved legs, a brazier that smoked only a little, a screen painted with pale orchids, and a low table set with porridge, pickled plums, and medicine for the nerves. A guilty woman was not kept so gently. A useful woman was. Rulan sat on the bed with her hair unpinned, face white, eyes swollen in a way that would have moved anyone who had not seen her practice sorrow in a bronze mirror. When the door opened, she lifted her head. For one instant, hope flashed across her face. Then she saw Shen Yu. The hope vanished. "Lord Shen," she whispered, "has my cousin sent you?" Shen Yu looked around the chamber. "Your cousin has better taste in furniture." Rulan's fingers tightened around her handkerchief. 2 Ministry of Justice guards stood outside the door. Officially, Shen Yu had come to review the evidence list. Unofficially, every person in the corridor knew that the second son of the Shen family was harmless enough to underestimate and inconvenient enough to avoid. That combination had opened more doors than talent ever could. Rulan lowered her eyes. "If Cousin Xue wishes to see me suffer, she has succeeded. Lady An Xue has made no such request. Then she is merciful." "Busy." That struck deeper than cruelty. Rulan's mouth trembled, but her eyes sharpened. "Good," Shen Yu thought. "There you are." He placed the official evidence list on the table. A red lacquer letter case was taken from your room. It did not reach the evidence archive. Rulan stared at him. "Not confusion. Calculation. Many things were taken," she said. "This one matters. If it is missing, perhaps the guards lost it." "Perhaps." Shen Yu opened his fan and let the silence lengthen. People who lied for survival often rushed to fill silence. People who lied for power waited to see what the silence wanted. Rulan waited. So did he. At last she smiled. It was small and tired, and pretty enough to fool a court painter. "Everyone thinks I am stupid because I cry." "I do not." "No," her gaze lifted. "You think I am stupid because I lost." Shen Yu considered that. "I think you are dangerous because you believe losing once makes you owed a second chance." The smile vanished. Outside, footsteps passed the corridor and faded. Rulan leaned forward. "Did Cousin Xue tell you what she did to me?" "She exposed your letters, your forged ledgers, your poisoned hairpin, and your cooperation with Minister Han. She stole my life." "That is an interesting description." "She was born legitimate, loved, protected, the great Duke and's precious daughter. I was brought into that house and told to be grateful for leftovers, smile smaller, walk softer, never outshine her, never want too much." Rulan's voice shook, and this time some of it was real. "Then the crown prince looked at me, and for the first time I saw a door." "So you helped build a trap around the family that fed you." "Families are traps." Shen Yu's fan stilled. For a moment, he thought of his elder brother's seal, missing since the night a palace fire had been called an accident. "Sometimes," he said, "but you chose who to burn." Rulan looked away. There, a flinch. He followed it carefully. "Who took the red lacquer case?" "I don't know." "Who knew it mattered?" "Everyone knew everything by the end." "No, most people knew about forged letters. Few knew one letter connected the northern ledger to a courier station." Her face went utterly still. Shen Yu smiled without warmth. "There." Rulan whispered, "If I answer, can you protect me?" "From whom?" She laughed softly. The sound had no innocence in it. "You are clever, Lord Shen. Don't pretend to be kind." "Kindness would be promising what I cannot do." "Then what can you do?" "I can make sure the first person to tell the truth survives longer than the last person to hide it." Rulan studied him. In another life, she might have been formidable in a cleaner way. She had patience, memory, hunger, a gift for seeing where affection made people weak. But she had mistaken manipulation for strategy. Strategy required knowing when a person would rather lose than belong to you. That was why she had never understood An Xue. Rulan reached beneath her pillow. The guards moved. Shen Yu raised one hand. Slowly, Rulan drew out a narrow strip of silk. On it, 2 characters had been written in diluted ink. Yao Liang. Shen Yu recognized the name. A clerk in the Ministry of War, minor rank, excellent handwriting, found dead near the northern road last winter. "He carried the receipt book," Shen Yu said. Rulan's eyes widened before she could hide it. "Thank you," he said. "I did not tell you anything." "No, you confirmed something." Rulan stood too quickly. "If you go after Yao Liang, they will know I spoke." "Who?" Her lips pressed shut. Fear moved through her face then, ugly and honest. Shen Yu folded the silk and placed it inside his sleeve. The Empress's people visited you before the ministry seal. Rulin sank back onto the bed. They said cousin Zhu would abandon me, she whispered. They said the Wen family would blame everything on me. They said if I remembered who had been generous, I might still have a place. And do you? She looked at him. The small smile returned. That depends who is willing to pay more. Shen Yu turned toward the door. Behind him, Rulin's voice softened. Lord Shen. He stopped. Tell my cousin something for me. No. Her smile cracked. He glanced back. If you have words for Lady An Xue, earn the right to deliver them yourself. For the first time, Rulin looked less like a discarded beauty and more like a prisoner. Shen Yu left the chamber with the silk hidden in his sleeve and the name Yao Liang burning through the cloth. At the corridor's end, an old palace eunuch bowed too deeply. Lord Shen, did second miss and say anything useful? Shen Yu smiled with all the harmlessness the capital expected from him. Only that the porridge is too thin. The eunuch laughed. Shen Yu laughed with him. Then he walked out of the palace knowing two things. Rulin was still lying. And someone powerful enough to move evidence before the Ministry of Justice had just become afraid of a dead courier's receipt book. Chapter 4. The Crown Prince brought no flowers. Zhao Ming came to the residence without flowers. The absence was so strange that the gatekeeper stared at his empty hands before remembering to kneel. In the past, the Crown Prince's visits had always announced themselves before he arrived. Plum blossoms in winter, jade hairpins in spring, silk from the southern provinces, poems copied in his own hand, each line polished until affection looked like virtue. An Xue had once kept every gift. In her first life, when the cold palace had taken even her winter cloak, she had remembered those gifts like proof that love had existed before cruelty. Now she knew better. Some men gave flowers because they were beautiful. Some gave flowers because petals hid the shape of a chain. Zhao Ming stood in the front hall beneath Dukin's stare and Madame Liang's silence. He wore court robes, not private silk, and his face showed the exhaustion of a man who had slept badly beside his own conscience. Commander N, he said, Madame Liang, Lady N. Dukin did not offer tea. Madame Liang did, which was worse. Her politeness could freeze blood. An Xue sat across from Zhao Ming with a low table between them. Chunyi stood behind her. Two and guards stood by the door. Neither pretended this was friendly. Zhao Ming looked at the guards, then back at An Xue. I deserve that. You deserve more than that, Dukin said. Father, An Xue said softly. He folded his arms and said nothing else, which for Duke and counted as restraint worthy of imperial reward. Zhao Ming placed a sealed document on the table. The censorate received a draft memorial this morning. It asks whether commanders whose daughters reject imperial marriages should be reviewed for divided loyalty. Madame Liang's expression did not change. A delicate sentence. It has not been submitted. Because you stopped it, An Xue asked. Because I delayed it. Dukin gave a harsh laugh. How generous. Zhao Ming accepted the blow without flinching. The censor who drafted it belongs to my mother's faction. If I crush him openly, she will send another. If I expose his source too soon, she will know which path we are watching. We, An Xue asked. The word landed harder than accusation. Zhao Ming's gaze moved to her face. For one foolish heartbeat, the room seemed to remember another life. The young prince and the devoted girl, the promise of marriage, the empire opening before them like a painted screen. Then An Xue remembered snow through broken windows. The memory cut the silk apart. Zhao Ming lowered his eyes first. You are right, I have not earned that word. No one spoke. He opened the document and pushed it across the table. This is the draft, this is the censor's seal, this is the clerk who copied it. The clerk's brother works in the Ministry of War Accounts office. An Xue read every line. It was worse than rumor because it sounded reasonable. No one accused Duke and of rebellion. No one named the Northern Army as disloyal. The memorial merely suggested that military power concentrated in marriage negotiations could unsettle the state. It was the kind of concern cowardly men loved. Concern required no proof. Only fear. "Why give this to me?" she asked. Zhao Ming's mouth tightened. "Because my mother intends to use me as the injured party." Madame Liang set down her tea. "And are you?" He looked at An Xue. Something old and selfish moved in his face, then was forced under. "Yes," he said, "but not in the way she wants." Dukin scoffed. Zhao Ming continued, voice quieter. "I was humiliated. I was refused. I was made to see what my household allowed and what I chose not to question. If I let that injury become a weapon against your family, then I prove lady and right to despise me." And Xue's fingers rested on the memorial. "I do not despise you." Pain crossed his face before he could stop it. Belief had hurt him last night. Indifference hurt him now. "Then what do you feel?" he asked. Dukin took one step forward. Madame Liang did not stop him. And Xue answered anyway, "Careful." Zhao Ming looked at her, as if she had closed a door without touching it. "Careful," he repeated. "You want forgiveness to be a road back to what we were. It is not. If you bring evidence, I will examine it. If you tell the truth, I will use it. If you try to turn guilt into a leash, I will cut it in public." The guards at the door stood very still. Zhao Ming's hands curled once over his knees, then opened. "Understood." Dukin looked almost disappointed that the prince had not argued. Madame Liang studied Zhao Ming over the rim of her cup. "Your Highness, what does Empress Wei believe you are doing here?" "Begging." "Are you?" He looked at An Xue again. This time, he did not let the answer soften. "No, I am warning the family that my mother's faction will move against the Northern Army within 10 days. "Why 10? An Xue asked. "Because the border inspection report arrives then. If the report can be stained before it reaches the emperor, every old suspicion becomes useful." An Xue remembered the report. In her first life, she had not paid attention. She had been busy embroidering wedding robes while men in quiet rooms prepared her father's ruin. The border report had named missing grain, unpaid soldiers, and weapons that did not match the ledgers. Later, those details became treason. She looked down at the draft memorial. The first stone had been placed. The road toward accusation had begun. Zhao Ming rose. "I will not ask you to trust me." "Good." That almost drew a smile from him, almost. At the door he paused. "Lady N." She looked up. "I did not know how much your silence cost you before." And Xue's expression remained calm. "You were not listening." He bowed. No defense. No flowers. Only the back of a prince leaving a house that had once opened to him like a future. When the gate closed, Dukin spoke first. "I still want to hit him." Madame Liang sighed. "Everyone knows." And Xue picked up the memorial again. Outside, Zhao Ming's carriage rolled away. Inside, the Wen family gathered around the first official shape of the trap. Flowers would have been easier. Truth, unfortunately, was useful. Chapter 5, Madame Liang's Tea Gathering. Madame Liang sent invitations on ivory paper. That was how the capital knew she was angry. Ordinary visits used white paper. Weddings used red. Mourning used plain cards with no scent. Ivory paper, faintly perfumed with osmanthus, meant the mistress of the residence intended to be gracious, expensive, and impossible to refuse. By afternoon, 12 noblewomen arrived. By evening, half the capital would know what they had said, what they had not said, and which pastry each woman had been too nervous to eat. And Xue stood behind the screen before the gathering began, watching her mother arrange the battlefield. Teacups, northern porcelain, not palaceware. Pastries, sweet bean cakes stamped with the Wen family crest, a quiet reminder that household dignity did not require imperial approval. Seating, Madame Su near the head, old Madame Pei opposite her, Lady Gao where she could hear everything, and 2 women tied to the censorate placed close enough to feel included, but far enough to know they were being measured. Madame Liang moved 1 cup half an inch to the left. "Mother," An Xue said, "you look happy." "I am furious." That is what I meant. Madame Liang smiled. In her first life, An Xue had never understood how much power her mother held. She had thought Madame Liang stayed away from politics because men spoke louder in court. Now she saw the truth. Men shouted in court because by the time they arrived there, women had already decided which doors would open. The guests entered in layers of silk and caution. They praised Madame Liang's health. They praised the tea. They praised An Xue's composure with the careful horror of people discussing a woman who had done something unforgettable. Old Madame Pei dispensed with all of it. "Your daughter refused a prince and still looks better than most brides," she said. Several women choked politely. Madame Liang poured tea. "Good lighting helps." An Xue bowed. "Old Madame is kind." "No, I am old. There is a difference." The room loosened by a breath. That was when Madame Liang began. "I invited you today because my family has been rude." Madame Xue's brows lifted. "Rude?" "Yes, we allowed the whole capital to discuss our private matter without offering refreshments." A few women laughed before they could stop themselves. Madame Liang gestured to Chunyi. Trays appeared, not documents this time, objects. A copied dowry key record, the broken clasp from the hairpin box, a physician's stamped note, a fragment of forged ledger paper, a list of names from Rulan's confiscated correspondence with sensitive lines covered in silk. Enough to show substance. Not enough to lose control. Lady Wen, whose husband worked near the censorate, touched the ledger fragment. Surely such matters belong to the Ministry of Justice. They do, Madame Liang said, which is why these are copies. Old Madame Pei leaned forward. Practical. Lady Wen's smile tightened. Some say then family means to pressure the investigation. An Xue stepped from behind her mother's chair. If we wished to pressure the investigation, Lady Wen, we would hide evidence. We are showing you what we have already given officials. I did not mean to imply. Of course not. The sweetness in An Xue's voice made the words sharper. Madame Liang hid a smile behind her cup. Madame Xue picked up the physician's note. This states the hairpin poison could weaken the body over time. Yes, An Xue said. Not kill at once. No, a slow illness would be easier to blame on grief, winter, or a weak constitution. The women understood. Every inner courtyard understood slow harm. Murder with a sword belonged to men and official records. Murder with medicine belonged to rooms where everyone smiled. Lady Gao's face hardened, and Second Mission possessed this. It was sent as a gift under her arrangement. Poor child, Lady Wen murmured, testing the phrase. Madame Liang set down her cup. The sound was soft. Every woman heard it. Poor children do not poison cousins. Silence bloomed. Then old Madame Pei laughed so loudly the maids startled. There, finally someone said it. After that, the gathering changed. Questions became more direct. Pity for Rulan became thinner. Concern over the family's arrogance began turning into curiosity about why the palace had allowed an engagement decree to proceed when forged evidence had already reached the banquet hall. Madame Liang did not accuse Empress Wei. She did not need to. She let the women arrive at the edge of that thought themselves. Before the guests left, An Xue served tea personally to Madame Xue. The older woman accepted the cup and spoke quietly. A memorial is being drafted. An Xue lowered her eyes. So I have heard. It will not name your father. It will not need to. Madame Xue looked at her for a long moment. You are young to understand that. I was younger when I failed to. The words slipped out too honestly. Madame Xue's gaze sharpened, but she asked no question. Instead, she said, the censorate respects clean evidence. If your family has any, produce it before the memorial enters the court record. We intend to. Then do so quickly. By the time the last carriage left, the lamps had been lit. Madame Liang stood in the doorway, watching the wheels disappear into the dark. 3 will speak for us, she said. 4 will repeat enough to help. 2 will report to the Empress. 1 will tell both sides and pretend loyalty is a matter of timing. An Xue smiled. Lady Wen. Naturally. Dukin emerged from the corridor. I understood none of that. You were not invited to. I live here. Barely. Chun-Yi pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. A servant hurried in before Dukin could answer. My lady, Lord Shen has sent a message. An Xue took the folded paper. Only one line. Yao Liang's widow still has the receipt book, but someone bought her silence this morning. An Xue's fingers tightened. Madame Liang read her face. The tea war is over. For today. Good, her mother's expression cooled into something elegant and dangerous. Then tomorrow we visit a widow. Outside, the capital kept whispering. Inside, though in residence, the women who had been expected to defend themselves began choosing where to strike. Chapter 6. The Dead Courier's Receipt. Yao Liang's widow lived behind a wine shop that watered its jars and overcharged soldiers. That alone told An Xue the woman was clever. The alley stank of old lees, wet straw, and river mud. Chun-Yi wrinkled her nose and stepped closer to her mistress. Madame Liang moved as if she had been born to visit poor widows in silk shoes, which meant she noticed every window curtain that shifted. Shen Yu waited beneath a crooked signboard, fan closed against his palm. Lady N, Madame Liang. Madame Liang looked him over. You chose a scenic route. The widow refuses respectable visitors. Sensible woman. An Xue looked toward the narrow door behind him. Who paid her? A man using the name Lusan. False beard. Northern accent performed badly. Paid in new silver from the Imperial Mint. Chun-Yi frowned. That is very specific. The wine shop owner enjoys details when frightened. Madame Liang's eyes brightened. How frightened? Appropriately. An Xue did not ask what that meant. Yao Liang's widow opened the door before they knocked. She was younger than An Xue expected. Not yet 30. Her hair was tied with plain cloth, and a child slept on a pallet behind her, one hand curled around a wooden horse missing 2 legs. The widow looked first at An Xue's face, then at Madame Liang's jewelry, then at Shen Yu's fan. No, she said. Then she tried to close the door. Madame Liang placed one gloved hand against it. We have not asked anything. Rich people ask by arriving. True. That honesty startled the woman enough for Madame Liang to continue. We came because someone paid you to stay silent. Silence has a price, so does speech. We would like to know which price includes your son surviving the next month. The widow's face went white. An Xue felt the old ache of recognition. Fear looked the same in every rank when it had a child's name attached. We are not here to threaten you, An Xue said. The widow's eyes flashed. Then you are late, everyone else has. Shen Yu's voice was mild. Was the man who called himself Lu San one of them? The widow gripped the door harder. That was answer enough. They entered. The room was clean, poor, and arranged for escape. Bundle near the back wall. Coin jar hidden badly enough to be noticed by thieves and well enough to fool officials. A knife beneath the table. Madame Liang sat without being invited. The widow stared. Madame Liang looked at the child. How old? 5. Old enough to remember if his mother disappears. The widow flinched. An Xue sat opposite her. Yao Liang carried a receipt book from the northern courier station. We believe that book proves someone forged military transfers in my father's name. I don't know your father's. No, but my father's enemies know you. The child turned in sleep and coughed. The widow closed her eyes. In her first life, An Xue had never met this woman. She had never known Yao Liang had a wife. The dead clerk had been a line in an accusation, then a body used to bury her family. How many lives had the palace turned into ink? When the widow opened her eyes, they were wet but hard. My husband was not a traitor. Then help us prove who made him look like one, An Xue said. The widow laughed once. Proof? I had proof. Then men came, then another man came. Then Lord Shen's people came asking soft questions, and I knew the proof had become more dangerous than hunger. Shen Yu accepted that without defense. Where is the receipt book? Gone. Chun-Yi's shoulders fell. The widow looked at her and almost smiled. I said the book was gone. I did not say I gave them everything. She knelt by the child's pallet and pulled up one floorboard. From beneath it, she took a strip of cloth wrapped around 3 pages. Not a book. Pages torn from one. An Xue unfolded them carefully. Dates, courier seals, parcel numbers, names of clerks receiving sealed packets. One entry stopped her breath. Northern Army Grain Adjustment Ledger, duplicate copy, delivered to Ministry of War Sub-Office. Received by Yao Liang. Countersigned by censor Wei Guang. Madame Liang leaned closer. Wei. Shen Yu's fan opened slowly. The Empress's maternal cousin. The widow spoke in a whisper. My husband said the ledger was wrong. He said the numbers had been copied by 2 hands. One clerk made the original record. Another changed the destination after sealing. An Xue remembered Shen Yu's warning like a shadow arriving early. A military ledger, written in 2 hands. Did he know who changed it? She asked. The widow shook her head. He said he would ask someone in the palace archives. He never came home. The child coughed again. Madame Liang removed a jade bracelet from her wrist and placed it on the table. The widow recoiled. I don't want your pity. Good, Madame Liang said. This is not pity. This buys travel, medicine, and silence until the inquiry. After that, if you testify, the Wen family will petition for your husband's name to be cleared. And if you lose? Duke An was not present to answer with pride. An Xue answered with truth. Then you should run before we do. The widow looked at her for a long moment. Then she took the bracelet. Outside, a bottle broke in the wine shop. Shen Yu moved first, placing himself between the door and the women. An Xue heard footsteps, too many to be customers, too soft to be drunkards. Madame Liang stood and lifted the sleeping child into her arms with shocking calm. Back door, she asked. The widow nodded. Chani opened it. In the alley beyond, 2 An family guards appeared as if Madame Liang had grown them from the shadows. Shen Yu looked impressed despite the danger. Madame Liang, did you think I visited alleys without bringing manners? The front door burst open behind them. An Xue saw only a flash of gray cloth and the dull glint of a knife. Then Shen Yu's fan snapped shut against the attacker's wrist. Bone cracked. The man screamed. Chani dragged An Xue through the back door. They ran under hanging laundry, past stacked jars, past a barking dog and a woman who pretended not to see anything. When they reached the carriage, Madame Liang handed the still sleeping child to his mother. The widow clutched him and shook so hard the bracelet fell into her lap. An Xue held the torn receipt pages under her sleeve. Behind them, Shen Yu emerged from the alley walking calmly, though his robe sleeve had been cut. An Xue's heart jumped before she could stop it. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He bowed slightly. The scenic route has concluded. Madame Liang looked at the blood on his cuff. Your sense of scenery is poor. But An Xue was staring at the torn pages. For the first time, the Empress's faction had touched the northern ledger with a visible hand. It was not enough to win. But it was enough to begin. Chapter 7. Shen Yu opens the wrong prison door. The wrong prison door was blue. That was how Shen Yu knew it was wrong. The Ministry of Justice prison used red seals for common criminals, black seals for officials under examination, and white seals for prisoners already condemned. Blue seals belonged to palace transfers. People behind blue doors were not supposed to exist in ministry records. Naturally, the clerk swore it had always been there. Lord Shen, perhaps you forgot, the clerk said, sweating through his collar. This corridor was reorganized last autumn. Shen Yu smiled pleasantly. I forget many things, bribery amounts, bad poems, faces of men who lie too eagerly. The clerk's mouth closed. An Xue stood 3 paces behind Shen Yu, veiled and dressed as a minor family attendant. Chani had hated the plan. Madame Liang had approved it, which meant Duke An had not been told until it was too late. The torn receipt pages had pointed to a palace archive inquiry. The archive inquiry had pointed to a missing assistant scribe. The missing scribe, according to Shen Yu's source, had been transferred to the ministry prison under no name at all. Now a blue seal waited at the end of the corridor. Shen Yu held up the transfer slip. Open it. The clerk's voice cracked. I do not have the key. Then borrow one from whoever paid you to forget the door. An Xue lowered her gaze to hide her expression. Shen Yu sounded lazy. He was angry. The difference was small, but she had begun to hear it. The clerk fumbled with his ring of keys. There may be procedural concerns. Shen Yu leaned closer. There may be a charge of obstructing an investigation into forged military records. The key appeared. The blue seal broke with a soft tear. Inside the cell sat a man with no shoes. He was thin, perhaps 40, with ink stains still visible around his nails. His hair had been cut unevenly. When light entered the room, he covered his face like a creature raised underground. Shen Yu's voice changed. "Scribe Liu." The man trembled. An Xue stepped forward before she meant to. She had seen men like this in her first life after their family's fall. Officials who knew one wrong number, one wrong name, one wrong night watchman's route. They did not need to be executed. They only needed to be kept until the truth spoiled. Shen Yu crouched near the prisoner. "Liu Cheng, you copied the original Northern Grain Ledger last winter." The man's lips moved. No sound came. Chunni handed over a water flask, and Xue took it and knelt, ignoring Shen Yu's startled glance. "Drink," she said. The scribe stared at her veil. "Are you Palace?" he rasped. "No." "Are you Wei?" "No." "Then leave." Shen Yu's eyes sharpened. "Who put you here?" The scribe hugged his knees. Wrong door, I was not here, I signed nothing." The clerk outside tried to edge away. Chunni stepped into his path. She was small. She also looked ready to remove skin with her teeth. He stayed. An Xue removed her veil. The scribe blinked at her face. "My name is An Xue," she said. "Duke An is my father. The forged ledger may be used to accuse him. If you copied the original, you know whether it was changed." Fear moved through him so violently that his hands struck the floor. No, I know nothing. The first copy was clean. I never saw the second. I never told Yao Liang to ask the palace archive. I never saw Lord Shen Jun's seal." The cell went silent. Shen Yu stopped breathing. An Xue turned slowly. "Lord Shen Jun. Shen Yu's elder brother. Dead in a palace fire 3 years ago." Shen Yu's face had gone pale in a way no lazy scholar could disguise. He reached into his sleeve and took out a small paper packet. Inside was the strip of silk with Yao Liang's name, the torn receipt copy, and now a blank space where a dead brother's name had just landed like a blade. "Say that again," he said. The scribe shook his head until his hair fell over his eyes. "I said nothing." Shen Yu's voice was very soft. "You said Lord Shen Jun's seal." "I didn't." "You did." The scribe began to cry without tears. "If I say it, I die." An Xue looked at Shen Yu. His fan was closed so tightly, his knuckles had whitened. For the first time since she had met him, he looked young. Not childish, never that. But struck in the place where grief had been locked for too long. An Xue turned back to the prisoner. "If you stay silent, you die slowly. If you speak, you may still die. But the people who buried you will know they failed to bury the truth." The scribe laughed once, broken and bitter. Noble people always make death sound useful. An Xue accepted the accusation. "Yes." He looked at her then. Perhaps because she did not deny it. Perhaps because truth, even harsh truth, was rarer than mercy in prison. He whispered, "The original ledger was clean. Grain shortfalls were in 3 southern depots, not the Northern Army. The second ledger moved the shortfalls north. Yao Liang noticed the seal weights differed. He asked me. I told him to compare the archive copy." "And Shen Jun?" Shen Yu asked. The scribe closed his eyes. "Lord Shen Jun found the same pattern 3 years ago in a palace supply case. He sealed a private memorandum. It disappeared after the fire." Shen Yu's mouth tightened. "Who ordered the ledger changed?" The scribe shook his head. "I heard only a title." An Xue leaned in. "What title?" "The Phoenix Hall. Empress Wei's residence." The words settled into the cold cell like frost. Outside, metal rang. The clerk gasped. Shen Yu stood at once. "We leave now." "The scribe," An Xue said. "Especially the scribe." But when they pulled Liu Cheng to his feet, he collapsed, not from weakness. Foam touched his lips. Chunni cried out. "Poison." Not enough to kill at once. enough to silence him soon. An Xue's blood went cold. Shen Yu caught the man under one arm. Move. They did not walk out of the ministry prison. They escaped it. Behind them, the blue-sealed door hung open. Wrong door, the scribe had said. But as An Xue ran beside Shen Yu through the prison corridor, she understood the truth. It had been exactly the right door. And opening, it had joined her second life, to a murder Shen Yu had been carrying alone. Chapter 8, The Second Prince Offers Courtesy. Second Prince Zhao Heng sent a physician. That was the first courtesy. He sent medicine for poison. That was the second. He sent both to the residence without asking to enter. That was the third, and the most dangerous. An Xue stood in the side courtyard while the physician examined Scribe Liu, who lay unconscious on a narrow bed usually used by injured guards. Madame Liang supervised the medicine. Shen Yu stood near the window, sleeve bandaged from the alley attack, face unreadable since the prison. Chunyi entered carrying a carved box. My lady, the second prince's steward delivered this. He says His Highness heard there had been an accident. Dukan frowned. How did he hear? Shen Yu answered, without looking away from the scribe. Anyone who has ears in the ministry prison heard. I dislike princes with ears. A broad category commander. An Xue opened the box. Inside lay 3 vials, a physician's note, and a smaller sealed envelope. The note listed ingredients. The handwriting was clear, restrained, and unfamiliar. The envelope contained one sentence. Some doors open more safely when the person holding the key is not the one expected. No signature. Zhao Heng had never appeared in her first life as an enemy. That did not make him harmless. In her first life, the second prince had remained polite, quiet, and alive through every court purge. After Zhao Ming became emperor, Zhao Heng had accepted a distant provincial title and vanished from the capital before the executions began. An Xue had once thought that made him weak. Now she knew survival was its own kind of talent. Madame Liang read the medicine note. This antidote is real. Dukan turned. You can tell from reading. I can tell from the doctor's expression. The physician, who had been trying to disappear into the wall, bowed lower. Scribe Liu survived the hour. That was enough to make Zhao Heng's courtesy impossible to ignore. By late afternoon, an invitation arrived. Not to An Xue. To Madame Liang. The second prince's household invited Madame Liang to inspect a donation of winter cloth for soldiers' families. It was the sort of public, respectable errand no one could call secret. Which meant it was definitely a meeting. Dukan hated it. Madame Liang accepted. An Xue went with her. The cloth donation was held at a temple courtyard near the Eastern Market. Widows, old soldiers, and poor families queued beneath bare trees. Zhao Heng stood near a stack of folded wool, dressed in plain blue robes without the crown prince's gold-threaded authority. He looked up as they entered. Unlike Zhao Ming, he did not make the room rearrange itself around his feelings. He bowed first to Madame Liang. Madame N, thank you for honoring the invitation. Then to An Xue, neither too warm nor too distant. Lady N. An Xue returned the courtesy. Your Highness. Zhao Heng did not mention the banquet. That alone separated him from half the capital. Madame Liang examined the cloth, asked 3 practical questions about distribution, and approved 2 ledgers with the air of a woman who had never come for cloth at all. Only after that did Zhao Heng speak quietly. The scribe should live if the medicine reached him in time. Dukan's guards shifted. An Xue looked at the prince. Your Highness is well informed. Poorly informed men die early in the capital. And generous men. Often earlier. His honesty was neat, almost too neat. Madame Liang's eyes rested on him with interest. Zhao Heng continued. The ministry prison has already reported that no blue-sealed cell exists. By morning, anyone who says otherwise will be accused of fabricating evidence. An Xue had expected that. It still angered her. Then why help us? She asked. He looked toward the widows receiving cloth. Because if forged ledgers can move grain shortages from southern depots to the northern army, then soldiers' families starve while officials grow rich. I dislike waste. Only waste. At that, he smiled faintly. Zhao Ming's smile had always tried to persuade. Zhao Heng's gave nothing away. I also dislike my brother being foolish enough to let our mother's faction decide the future of the throne. There it was. Not virtue. Position. An Xue preferred that. Virtue was easily performed, interest had clearer edges. Do you want the crown prince weakened? She asked. He has already achieved that without my assistance. Madame Liang made a small sound that might have been a cough. Zhao Heng's gaze did not leave An Xue. I want the Empress's faction checked before they create a border crisis to save themselves from a household scandal. An Xue's fingers tightened inside her sleeve. You know about the borders. I know a grain convoy meant for the northern garrison was redirected 3 months ago. I know the substitute convoy carried spoiled millet. I know the report arrives in less than 10 days. And you waited until now. Until now, the Yuan family was expected to become the crown prince's shield. After last night, you became the blade. The words should have sounded flattering. They sounded like a warning. An Xue lifted her chin. Blades decide whose hand holds them. For the first time, Zhao Heng's polite mask shifted into something like approval. So I have noticed. He handed her a folded map. The grain convoy was recorded at East Reed Station. Ask for the night register, not the day ledger. The day ledger was copied for court. The night register was kept by the stable master, who cares more about horses than politics. An Xue accepted the map. What is your price? For now, accuracy. No one gives information for accuracy. Then consider this my opening courtesy. Madame Liang spoke at last. Your Highness, courtesy becomes debt when repeated. Zhao Heng bowed. Then I shall be careful not to repeat it too often. The meeting ended with winter cloth, polite thanks, and 3 layers of danger. On the carriage ride home, An Xue unfolded the map. Chunyi leaned over. Do we trust him? An Xue looked at the marked station. Zhao Ming offered guilt. Shen Yu offered evidence. Zhao Heng offered courtesy, with a knife hidden under its sleeve. No, An Xue said, but we used the map. Across the city, a prince who had survived by being overlooked watched the carriage disappear and smiled as if the board had finally become interesting. Chapter 9, a military ledger written in 2 hands. East Reed Station smelled of horses, wet hay, and honest irritation. The stable master did not care that An Xue was a noble lady. He cared that 6 armed guards, 1 veiled woman, 1 maid, and 1 useless-looking scholar had arrived during feeding hour. If this is about taxes, come back after the horses eat, he said. Shen Yu opened his fan. It is about treason. The stable master looked at him. Then at the horses. Taxes are worse. An Xue decided she liked him. They had come at dusk, using Zhao Heng's map and Madame Liang's excuse of inspecting winter supply routes. Duke and had wanted to send soldiers. Madame Liang had said soldiers turned questions into banners. Shen Yu had volunteered before anyone asked him, which meant he was either useful or trying not to sit alone with what Scribe Liu had said about his brother. An Xue understood that too well. Sometimes action was the only wall between a person and grief. The stable master, whose name was Hu, led them to a side office stacked with harnesses and old registers. Day ledgers already gone to the capital. We want the night register, An Xue said. Hu stopped. His eyes moved from her veil to Shen Yu's fan to the guards outside. Who told you that exists? Someone who respects horses. Hu grunted, then he has 1 virtue. He pulled a register from beneath a feed bin. Chunyi looked horrified. Shen Yu looked delighted. An Xue opened the book on a crate. The first entries were ordinary. Arrival times, cart numbers, feed issued, horse injuries, weather notes. Hu wrote bluntly and spelled poorly. That made the record stronger. No court clerk would invent a note reading 3rd Bay mule bit stupid Zhang again. Then they reached the convoy date. Northern Grain Convoy, 6 carts, sealed under Ministry of War stamp. Arrived 2nd watch. Departed before dawn. 2 carts exchanged. An Xue read the line again. 2 carts exchanged. Hu spat to the side. not my idea. Shen Yu leaned in. Who ordered it? Paper said ministry adjustment. Clerk had a smooth face and soft hands, didn't know a cart axle from his mother's hairpin. Name. Signed Wei Guang. There it was again. Empress Wei's cousin. An Xue copied the entry with steady hands. Who watched her? That ledger got people killed. Yes. Thought so. He walked to a shelf and pulled down a wrapped board. Inside lay a torn cart seal, wax cracked but still bearing half a stamp. Northern Army Supply Office. The other half had been pressed over it in different wax. Ministry of War Redistribution. 2 hands. 1 record. 1 lie laid over truth. Shen Yu's fan lowered. You kept this. Who scratched his jaw? Bad waxwork annoys me. Chunyi whispered, bless bad waxwork. An Xue took the seal carefully. In her first life, the forged ledger had seemed invincible because it arrived with official stamps. She had not known stamps could be layered. She had not known truth sometimes survived because a stable master disliked incompetence. She looked at who. If called to testify, will you? Depends who calls. The Ministry of Justice. No. The Ren family. No. Shen Yu tilted his head. Who then? Who looked toward the stalls. Someone who can keep my horses from being requisitioned by angry officials before I finish speaking. Practical fear. An Xue respected it. If the crown prince orders protection. Who laughed? Princes don't know horses. Dukan does. Who studied her more seriously? The northern commander. My father. He pays for feed on time. Shen Yu murmured, a rare moral foundation. Who ignored him? If Dukan gives written protection for the station and its horses, I'll say what I saw. Done, An Xue said. On the road back, rain began. Not enough to wash tracks away. Enough to make lantern light blur and carriage wheels hiss through mud. An Xue held the copied register entry and the broken seal in her lap. Shen Yu sat across from her, quieter than usual. You have not asked, he said. She looked up. About your brother. His eyes moved to the rain-dark window. Most people would. Most people ask questions to own the answer. He looked back at her. The carriage rocked between them. For a moment, the world narrowed to rain, lamplight, and the small space where neither of them pretended not to be wounded. Shen Jun was my elder brother, he said at last. Brilliant, upright, insufferable at chess. He investigated palace supply theft 3 years ago and died in a fire before submitting his memorandum. You believe he was murdered? I know he was. An Xue's hand tightened around the broken seal. In my first life, she said carefully, many truths arrived too late. He watched her. She had never said so much. Not directly. Is that why you see traps before others see doors? He asked. Yes. He did not ask how. Instead, he folded his fan and bowed his head slightly. Then I am sorry for every truth that arrived late. The words entered quietly. They did not demand comfort. They did not ask for confession. They simply sat beside her grief without trying to move it. An Xue looked away first. Outside, thunder rolled over the road. Ahead, the capital waited with its rumors, memorials, and painted smiles. But now An Xue had the night register, the broken seal, and the first visible proof that someone had rewritten the Northern Army's guilt by hand. This time, the ledger would not bury her family. This time, it would point back to the person holding the brush. Chapter 10. Zhao Ming kneels before the gate. The memorial entered the censorate at dawn. By noon, every official with ambition had read a copy. By afternoon, Dukan's loyalty had become a topic suitable for polite concern. No one called him a traitor. Not yet. They called him proud, influential, emotionally entangled in his daughter's refusal of imperial grace, perhaps too beloved by the Northern Army, perhaps too wounded by the broken engagement to separate family honor from state duty. An Xue read the memorial once and placed it on the table. Dukan read 3 lines and tried to leave for the censorate with a sword. Madame Liang locked the sword cabinet. Wife's husband. This is slander. Yes. Slander should be answered. It will be. With steel. With evidence. Duke An looked personally betrayed by civilization. An Xue pressed a hand to her forehead. Father, if you storm into the censorate armed, they will add a second memorial before dinner. Let them, I will be there. That is the issue. Before Duke An could respond, a servant ran in so quickly he nearly fell. My lord, my lady, His Highness the Crown Prince is outside. The room went silent. Madame Liang's eyes narrowed. Alone. No, my lady, with witnesses. An Xue went cold. The An family moved to the front courtyard. Outside the main gate, Crown Prince Zhao Ming stood in formal court robes beneath the white winter sun. Behind him waited officials from the Eastern Palace, 2 censorate clerks, several noble passers-by who were pretending not to stare, and enough servants to guarantee the entire capital would know by dusk. Then Zhao Ming knelt. Gasps scattered through the street. Duke An stopped dead. An Xue did not move. Zhao Ming's voice carried clearly. Commander An has served the throne for 28 years. The Northern Army has guarded the border through famine, winter raids, and 3 succession disputes. Any man who stains that loyalty for factional advantage insults the empire. One of the censorate clerks turned pale. Zhao Ming continued, still kneeling. The failed engagement between this prince and Lady An Xue is a private disgrace belonging first to me. It must not be used as a blade against a loyal general. The street held its breath. An Xue understood the move immediately. It was brilliant. It was reckless. It was selfish in a new way. By kneeling before the gate, Zhao Ming publicly separated his humiliation from the accusations against Duke An. He made it harder for the Empress's faction to use him as the injured heir. He also tied his reputation to the An family's loyalty before the full evidence could emerge. If they fell, he fell closer. If they survived, he could claim he had stood with them. Duke An's face twisted through 6 emotions, none comfortable. Madame Liang looked at An Xue. This was her choice to answer. An Xue stepped forward until she stood just inside the open gate. Not outside with him. Not hidden within. Your Highness, she said, voice calm, please rise. Zhao Ming looked up. For one dangerous second, his eyes held the foolish hope that public sacrifice might open a private door. An Xue let him see that it would not. He rose anyway. The An family thanks your Highness for speaking fairly, she said. Fairly. Not lovingly. Not gratefully. Fairness was a cold reward for a man who wanted forgiveness. But it was a reward. The watching officials heard it. So did Zhao Ming. He bowed. I spoke what should have been obvious. Obvious truths often require witnesses. Then I am glad there are witnesses. Duke An muttered, I am not. Madame Liang stepped lightly on his foot. Zhao Ming's gaze flicked toward them, and despite everything, a small, pained humor touched his mouth. Then it vanished. Lady An, he said, the censorate has requested an imperial inquiry in 3 days. An Xue had expected 10. Empress Wei had accelerated. 3 days, she repeated. Yes. And you came here before telling the palace. The palace already knows. Your mother knows. She will by now. The street seemed to grow colder. This was not a son quietly disobeying his mother. This was a prince drawing a line in daylight. An Xue studied him. In her first life, Zhao Ming had wanted power without moral cost. He had let others do cruel work, then accepted the throne clean-handed. This Zhao Ming was not clean. But perhaps he was beginning to understand that refusing dirt after benefiting from it was another kind of lie. You should return to the palace, she said. I will. Your Highness. He paused. Do not mistake usefulness for trust. The words struck him. He bowed more deeply. I will try not to. When he left, the witnesses followed in a storm of whispers. By evening, the city had a new rumor. The crown prince had knelt before the An family gate. Some said it proved his guilt. Some said it proved his devotion. Some said it proved Duke An was too powerful. An Xue listened to the reports in her study, with the broken cart seal beside her hand. Shen Yu arrived after sunset, rain on his shoulders and no fan in sight. That worried her more than blood. Scribe Liu woke, he said. An Xue stood. Can he testify? Not yet, but he wrote one name before fainting again. He placed a scrap of paper on the desk. Wei Guang, Empress Wei's cousin. The man whose seal appeared on the station record. The man whose faction had moved the memorial. The inquiry was in 3 days. An Xue looked at the name, the seal, the receipt pages, and the city beyond her window where the crown prince's kneeling had turned every rumor sharper. 3 days was not enough. So it would have to be. Chapter 11, the Empress sends a marriage list. Empress Wei did not send soldiers. She sent names. The list arrived in a carved sandalwood box, carried by 4 palace attendants and 1 elderly female official, whose face had been trained into permanent disapproval. Her Majesty worries for Lady Anne's reputation, the official said in the residence's front hall. After the regrettable disturbance at the banquet, suitable arrangements should be considered quickly. Dukan stared at the box as if it contained snakes. Madame Liang smiled. How thoughtful. That meant war. An Xue accepted the box with both hands and opened it. Inside lay 8 marriage candidates. Second sons, widowers, a scholar with no post, a minor marquis whose first wife had died under household rumors, men respectable enough to avoid insult, weak enough to remove An Xue from the center of politics, and distant enough that the family's power would be diluted through marriage instead of decree. At the bottom of the list, written in Empress Wei's own hand, was 1 sentence. A woman's peace is found when her household is settled. An Xue almost laughed. In her first life, peace had been a locked palace, a winter room, and a bowl of medicine no one explained. If that was peace, she preferred war. The female official watched her closely. Her Majesty says Lady Anne may choose from the list. It is a rare grace. Please thank Her Majesty, An Xue said. I will consider each name with the seriousness it deserves. Dukan made a sound. Madame Liang coughed. The official looked satisfied. She thought she had cornered them into politeness. An Xue lifted the first card. Lord Kaiyan's second son, did he not gamble away 2 farms last year? The official stiffened. Young men can change. Of course, An Xue set the card aside. Marquis Ding, his first wife died after falling into a lotus pond in winter. An accident. How tragic, he must miss her in warm weather. Chunyi made a strangled noise behind her. Madame Liang's smile became dangerously serene. An Xue continued through the list, 1 name at a time. No raised voice, no open insult, only facts sharpened to fit under the skin. By the 7th name, the female official's face had gone gray. By the 8th, Dukan looked proud enough to forgive civilization. An Xue closed the box. Her Majesty has offered concern. The An family is grateful. But until the imperial inquiry clears the slander against my father, it would be improper for me to consider private happiness. Private happiness, the official repeated. Marriage is important. Loyalty to the throne is more important. Surely Her Majesty would not wish the capital to think she values my wedding prospects above the truth of a military accusation. The room chilled. The official had come to shame An Xue into silence. An Xue had turned the list into evidence of the Empress, avoiding the inquiry. Madame Liang poured tea, as if nothing wonderful had happened. Please take refreshments before you return. No, thank you. The official left with the marriage list, the sandalwood box, and the expression of someone carrying a snake after all. When the doors closed, Dukan burst out, Lotus Pond in winter. He should have chosen a warmer murder, Madame Liang said. Wife's alleged murder. An Xue smiled despite herself. The smile faded when Shen Yu arrived an hour later with bad news. Wei Guang has disappeared from his residence. Dukan slammed a palm on the table. Of course he has. Not fled, Shen Yu said, hidden. An Xue looked up. By whom? The Phoenix Hall sent a covered carriage through the Western Palace gate before dawn. Madame Liang's expression cooled. The Empress is protecting him. Or preparing to sacrifice him. An Xue considered that. Wei Guang could name Empress Wei. He could also be made to confess just enough to close the case while leaving the deeper conspiracy untouched. The inquiry is in 2 days, she said. Yes. Then she needs either a scapegoat or a corpse. Shen Yu nodded. Chunyi entered with another folded message, from the palace. An Xue expected Zhao Ming. The seal was different. Second Prince Zhao Heng. The note contained only 4 words. Ask Rulin about plum wine. Dukin frowned, plum wine. Madame Liang looked at An Xue. An Xue remembered suddenly. Before the broken engagement, Rulin had sent plum wine to Zhao Ming's estate after every private meeting with Empress Wei's attendants. An Xue had thought it was flirtation, a cousin's soft attempt to look refined. But in her first life, after the family fell, Rulin had once laughed drunkenly and said, "Men read letters. Women read bottles." An Xue stood. Rulin knows how messages moved. Shen Yu closed his fan. She will name a price. Then we find out whether she prefers survival to revenge. Dukin looked horrified. You want to bargain with her? No, An Xue said. I want her to understand that the Empress has already chosen who to bury. That night, while the marriage list returned to the palace, and the capital discussed whether An Xue had insulted 8 men at once, Rulin sat in her beautiful cell drinking thin porridge. She did not yet know that the woman she had tried to replace was coming. She did not yet know the Empress had sent a list of husbands. And she did not yet know that one of those names belonged to a man Rulin had once begged not to be married to. Chapter 12, The Northern Army is Accused. The accusation arrived with imperial formatting. That made it uglier. An Xue stood in her father's study as Duke and read the court notice aloud. His voice did not shake, but the paper did. Irregularities have been found in northern grain transfers. Spoiled millet entered winter stores. Weapon tallies conflict with ministry copies. The commander is requested to present himself at inquiry to explain discrepancies. Requested. Explain. Discrepancies. Every polite word held a blade. Madame Liang took the notice from her husband's hand before he crushed it. They moved faster than expected. Because Wei Guang disappeared, Shen Yu said, they need the accusation fixed before we can produce him. Zhao Ming arrived 10 minutes later. This time, Dukin allowed him inside without theatrical suggestions of violence. That, more than anything, showed how serious the day had become. The crown prince looked as if the palace had emptied its knives into his back overnight. My mother claims Wei Guang has taken ill, he said. Where? An Xue asked. Phoenix Hall. Shen Yu gave a soft laugh. Conveniently ill. Conveniently guarded, Zhao Ming said. I cannot reach him without openly accusing the Empress of hiding a witness. Duke An's eyes burned, then accuse her. Zhao Ming met his gaze. If I do it before the inquiry, she will call it a son's rebellion and your evidence will look like my excuse. Duke An hated the answer because it was correct. An Xue laid out what they had. Receipt pages from Yao Liang's widow, the night register copy, the broken layered seal, Scribe Liu's written name, and Zhao Ming's draft memorial warning. It looked like a great deal. It was not enough. Not against an empress. Madame Liang touched the receipt page. We can prove the ledger was altered. Shen Yu nodded. We can prove Wei Guang touched the alteration. Zhao Ming added, we can show the accusation began through my mother's faction. An Xue looked at the empty space between proof and guilt. But we cannot prove Empress Wei ordered it. No one answered. Outside, a northern wind struck the shutters. In her first life, this was where the road had begun to narrow. The accusation had arrived dressed as procedure. Her father had gone to court angry and honest. He had believed loyalty would defend itself. By the time he learned loyalty needed evidence, the evidence had been replaced. An Xue would not let him walk that road twice. Father, she said. Duke An looked at her. At the inquiry, do not defend your pride. His brows rose. Defend your soldiers. Speak only of grain, names, dates, and the men who would have starved if the spoiled millet had reached the northern pass. They will insult me. Yes. They will imply I am a traitor. Yes. And you want me calm. Madame Liang answered, I want you terrifyingly calm. Duke An looked from his wife to his daughter. Then he laughed once without humor. You both enjoy impossible orders. Zhao Ming watched the exchange with something like grief. Perhaps he was remembering all the times he had seen the family as an asset instead of a living house. Good, An Xue thought. Let regret educate him. A servant entered and bowed. My lady, the ministry prison has approved a visit to second Miss and Rulan. An Xue looked at Shen Yu. He looked back. Rulan's price was coming. The prison chamber smelled sweeter than before. Too much incense, too much medicine, too much effort to hide fear. Rulan sat at the low table, hair arranged perfectly, face pale enough to look wrong. When An Xue entered, Rulan smiled. Cousin finally visits. You look comfortable. You look free, we both exaggerate. An Xue sat across from her. Shen Yu remained by the door. Chunyi stood behind An Xue with open hostility. Rulan's gaze moved between them. You brought your scholar. You brought your lies. Fewer than usual, prison limits recreation. An Xue placed the marriage list on the table. Rulan's smile faltered. Her Majesty sent this today, An Xue said, to settle my household. Rulan looked down the names. When she reached the fourth, her face changed. Lord Kaiyan's second son. An Xue saw the truth land. You recognize him. Rulan's lips whitened. No. In your letters, you once begged not to be sent to the Kaiyan household. You wrote that Lord Kaiyan's son broke maids for sport. Rulan shoved the list away. Why show me this? Because the Empress offered him to me after promising you protection. Rulan's eyes lifted slowly. An Xue leaned closer. Do you still think she will save you? For once, Rulan had no ready tears. Only fear. Outside the prison door, keys rang in the corridor like warning bells. The Northern Army had been accused. The Empress was hiding Wei Guang. And in Rulan, who had thought herself useful, finally began to understand what happened to pawns after they crossed the board for someone else. Chapter 13. Rulan names her price. Rulan did not cry. That made An Xue listen more carefully. Tears were Rulan's theater. Dry eyes meant the performance had ended or the real bargain had begun. She sat in the prison chamber with the Empress's marriage list between them, one fingertip resting beside Lord Kaiyan's name. You want plum wine, Rulan said. An Xue did not blink. I want the truth behind it. Truth is expensive. So is betrayal. You have been paying for years. Rulan's mouth tightened. Shen Yu stood by the door, quiet enough to be mistaken for furniture by someone less intelligent. Rulan knew better. Her eyes kept flicking toward him. If I speak, she said, the Empress will kill me. If you stay silent, she will trade you. To Kaiyan. Or someone worse. Rulan laughed softly. You always had the luxury of fearing death. Some of us feared marriage more. Chunyi bristled, but An Xue raised one hand. There was bitterness in Rulan's words, and poison, and something uncomfortably true. A noble girl without protection could be sold very politely. That did not excuse what Rulan had done. But understanding a blade did not mean forgiving the cut. Name your price, An Xue said. Rulan leaned back. A written promise from Duke, and that I will not be returned to my father's branch family. Possible. A petition for exile to a southern convent instead of execution. Chunyi burst out, after what you did. Rulan looked at her. Yes. Shen Yu spoke for the first time. That price assumes your truth is large enough. Rulan smiled at him. It is. An Xue studied her cousin. Before the banquet, Rulan had wanted An Xue's place. Now she wanted out. That frightened An Xue more than ambition. Continue, An Xue said. Rulan touched the marriage list again. And one more thing, I want the Kaiyan name ruined publicly. An Xue frowned. Why? Because when I was 13, my aunt tried to send me there. Madame Liang stopped it. An Xue went still. She had not known. Rulan's eyes sharpened at her surprise. Your mother never told you? Of course not. In the Wen house, kindness was allowed to remain invisible. It made gratitude easier to demand. No one demanded gratitude for saving you from that. No, They only expected me to understand I had nowhere else to go. Silence pressed into the chamber. An Xue thought of childhood meals, shared embroidery frames, Rulan's soft hand slipping into hers during thunder. Had there been gratitude then? Resentment? Both. In her first life, An Xue had believed betrayal erased every tender memory. In this life, she was beginning to understand something worse. Betrayal could grow inside tenderness if bitterness found enough dark. The Cayenne name is not part of this case, Shen Yu said. Rulan looked at him, then find a way to make it part. An Xue folded the list. I will not promise revenge as payment. Rulan's expression hardened. But if evidence of abuse exists, An Xue continued, I will not protect him. Rulan looked away first. That was agreement. An Xue took out a blank paper, plum wine. Rulan exhaled. When Empress Wei's attendants wanted instructions passed without letters, they sent wine. Sweet plum for proceed. Sour plum for delay. Plum with gold thread around the neck meant destroy evidence. Plum with red thread meant move a person. Shen Yu's fan opened, and Wei Guang. Gold thread first, red thread after the banquet. We're moved. Rulan swallowed, Old Phoenix Garden. An Xue had never heard of it. Zhao Ming had. His voice came from the doorway. That garden was sealed after my aunt died. Everyone turned. The guards behind him looked deeply unhappy. Shen Yu looked amused. Rulan looked as if a ghost had entered. Zhao Ming stepped inside, eyes fixed on Rulan. How do you know that place? Rulan's face shifted, searching for the right mask. An Xue cut through it, because she carried messages for your mother. Zhao Ming's jaw tightened. Rulan whispered, Your Highness. He did not soften. Do not call me as if we are children in a garden. The words struck her harder than anger. An Xue watched without satisfaction. Once, she might have wanted Zhao Ming to reject Rulan for her sake. Now she wanted only the information. Old Phoenix Garden, Shen Yu said. Could Wei Guang be held there? Zhao Ming nodded. If my mother wants him hidden from court officials, but close enough to produce tomorrow. Or close enough to die, An Xue said. Rulan looked at the marriage list again. I named my price, she whispered. An Xue folded the paper with the wine code. If your information saves my father, I will argue for exile. I will not promise pardon. And Cayenne. Bring me evidence. Rulan's mouth trembled. For once, the tears that gathered looked like fury instead of calculation. I hate you, she said. An Xue stood. I know. You had everything. No, An Xue said. I had enough that you believed taking it would save you. Rulan flinched. An Xue left the chamber with Zhao Ming and Shen Yu on either side of her, two men who represented two different dangers. Behind her, Rulan laughed once. It broke halfway through. Outside the prison, Zhao Ming spoke first. Old Phoenix Garden has 3 gates. My mother's guards know too. Shen Yu's eyes sharpened, and the third. Zhao Ming looked at An Xue. My aunt used it to leave the palace before she died. An Xue heard the old grief beneath the court-trained voice. Another dead woman. Another sealed garden. Another truth buried behind imperial walls. Tomorrow was the inquiry. Tonight, they would have to steal a witness from the Empress. Chapter 14, The Imperial Inquiry. Wei Guang was alive when they found him. Barely. Old Phoenix Garden lay behind a sealed moon gate, choked with dead vines and memories the palace preferred not to prune. Zhao Ming led them through the 3rd gate just before dawn, using a key he had taken from an old lacquer box in his private study. He did not explain why he had kept it. An Xue did not ask. Some grief had to be carried until the person carrying it chose to set it down. Wei Guang was hidden in a gardener's room with 2 guards, 1 physician, and a bowl of black medicine cooling beside his bed. Shen Yu disabled the first guard with the handle of his fan. Chun Yi struck the second with a flower pot. Zhao Ming held his sword to the physician's throat and said, in a voice An Xue had never heard from him before, if he dies before the inquiry, you answer to me. The physician became extremely committed to life. By the time the imperial inquiry began, Wei Guang was pale, sweating, and alive enough to be inconvenient. The inquiry hall was built to make truth feel small. High pillars, cold floor, officials seated by rank, the emperor behind a gauze screen, Empress Wei beside him, face serene beneath a phoenix crown that seemed heavier than guilt. Dukan knelt in the center. An Xue stood behind the family screen with Madame Liang. Zhao Ming stood to the right as crown prince. Shen Yu stood with the Ministry of Justice officials, wearing his useless expression like armor. The chief censor read the accusation. Spoiled grain, missing weapon tallies, altered supply routes, possible negligence by the Northern Command. Not treason. Not yet. But every word leaned toward it. Dukan listened without moving. When invited to answer, he bowed. This commander requests the right to speak first of the soldiers. The hall shifted. The chief censor frowned. You may answer the charge. The charge concerns grain meant for soldiers, therefore I will speak of them. Madame Liang's hand tightened around An Xue's. Dukan's voice filled the hall, not loud, but iron steady. He named the garrisons, the passes, the winters when men tied cloth around their feet because boots arrived late, the raids stopped because hungry soldiers held the line anyway, the families who waited for pay, the commanders who signed receipts because trust in the capital was supposed to mean something. He did not defend his pride. He defended the men who would have eaten spoiled millet if the lie had reached them. By the time he finished, several officials looked ashamed. Empress Wei did not. The chief censor cleared his throat. Evidence has been presented that ministry records differ from northern receipts. Shen Yu stepped forward, then let us examine which records changed. He presented the torn receipt pages. The night register. The broken layered seal. Scribe Liu's written statement. Each item entered the hall like a stone, dropped into still water. Empress Wei watched calmly until Wei Guang's name was spoken. Then one finger moved against her sleeve. Only An Xue saw it. The chief censor frowned over the seal. This suggests an alteration after the original military stamp. Shen Yu bowed, yes. Who countersigned the altered copy? The hall doors opened. Every head turned. Zhao Ming walked forward with Wei Guang supported between two guards. The Empress's face did not change. That was how An Xue knew she was furious. Wei Guang collapsed to his knees. The chief censor stood, Censor Wei. Wei Guang looked toward Empress Wei. She looked back with the tender calm of a woman watching a candle burn down. Zhao Ming spoke. Censor Wei was found hidden in Old Phoenix Garden under palace guard. The emperor coughed behind the screen. Explain, he said. Wei Guang shook so hard the floor seemed to receive the tremor. This official was ill. Shen Yu smiled, in a sealed garden. I was ordered. He stopped. Empress Wei finally spoke. Cousin, illness has confused you. Answer only what you know. The warning was silk over steel. Wei Guang heard it. So did everyone else. An Xue stepped forward from behind the family screen. Gasps rose. Women did not speak in imperial inquiries unless called. An Xue bowed deeply. Your Majesty, this subject begs permission to ask one question. The emperor was silent long enough for the hall to remember breathing. Ask. An Xue turned to Wei Guang. Censor Wei, when gold thread was tied around the plum wine sent from Phoenix Hall, which evidence were you ordered to destroy? Wei Guang's eyes widened. Empress Wei's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. The hall did not understand yet. But the Empress did. That was enough. Wei Guang broke. The red lacquer case, he whispered. The courier copy, anything with Yao Liang's station seal. The chief censor's face changed. Shen Yu stepped in smoothly, and the red thread. Wei Guang sobbed, move me, hide me until the inquiry. Who ordered the wine sent? He looked at Empress Wei. The hall froze. But fear was a habit, and Wei Guang had practiced it too long. An attendant of Phoenix Hall, he said. I never saw Her Majesty give the order. Not enough. An Xue had known it might not be enough. Still, the trap had opened. The emperor spoke behind the screen. Censor Wei will be detained. The altered ledger is void pending full review. Commander and is cleared of negligence in the matter presented today. Dukan bowed until his forehead touched the floor. Madame Liang exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour. Empress Wei's face remained beautiful. That made An Xue's skin prickle. They had won the inquiry. They had not defeated the Empress. As officials began to move, Zhao Ming turned to An Xue. In front of the court, with his mother watching and his pride already broken once, he bowed. Lady N, this prince asks for your assistance in investigating the remaining rot in the court. Whispers exploded. Not marriage. Not apology. Alliance. An Xue looked at him, then at the Empress, then at Shen Yu standing very still beside the ministry officials. The road divided again. This time, she chose with open eyes. Chapter 15. She accepted an alliance, not a cage. An Xue did not answer Zhao Ming at once. That was the first thing the court noticed. The crown prince had bowed before her in the imperial inquiry hall and asked for her assistance. Not her hand, not her forgiveness, not her return to the engagement he had lost. Her assistance. That made the request acceptable enough to survive. It also made it dangerous enough to reshape the capital by nightfall. Empress Wei sat beside the emperor, with a face carved from jade. Dukan remained kneeling, cleared but not yet released from the weight of accusation. Madame Liang watched her daughter with the controlled stillness of a woman who knew history sometimes changed, because someone paused long enough before speaking. Zhao Ming kept his bow. An Xue let the silence teach him humility for one breath longer. Then she said, "Your Highness asks for an alliance." He raised his head, "Yes." "Without marriage." The hall inhaled. Zhao Ming's throat moved. In his eyes, she saw the old wish flicker. The foolish, wounded hope that if he behaved well enough, the story might bend backward. Then he buried it. "Without marriage," he said. The words cost him. That was good. Things that cost nothing were usually traps. An Xue turned to the emperor's screen and bowed. This subject is willing to assist any lawful investigation into forged military records, stolen evidence, and corruption affecting the Northern Army. Zhao Ming's face changed. Not joy. Not relief. Understanding. She had accepted the work, not the man. However, An Xue continued, my family's cooperation has one condition. The chief censor looked alarmed. Lady N. The emperor coughed, speak. An Xue lifted her head. No witness in this case is to be moved, silenced, married off, exiled, or declared conveniently ill without Ministry of Justice record and imperial review. The hall went silent. Everyone understood. No one looked directly at Empress Wei. That made the accusation louder. Behind the screen, the emperor said, granted. Empress Wei's fingers tightened around her cup. The sound of porcelain cracking was very small. An Xue heard it anyway. The inquiry ended with formal orders. Wei Guang was detained. The Northern Ledger was sealed for review. Scribe Liu was placed under ministry protection. Yao Liang's widow would be called as a witness. Dukan was cleared of the charge presented, though everyone knew the Empress's faction would begin searching for another blade before sunset. Outside the hall, Zhao Ming caught up to An Xue beneath the carved eaves. Lady N. She stopped. Rain had begun again, fine and silver beyond the palace steps. You accepted, he said. I accepted an investigation. I know. Do you? He flinched, then nodded. I am learning. An Xue looked at him carefully. This was the danger of a regretful man. If he became better, people would ask her to reward him for it. They would call her cruel if she did not soften. They would mistake his growth for her obligation. She would not. Your Highness, she said, if we work together, you will not visit my residence without notice. You will not send gifts. You will not speak of the past as if pain is a bridge. You will bring evidence, witnesses, and access, nothing else. Zhao Ming absorbed each sentence like a deserved blow. Understood. If you forget, I will remind you publicly. A faint, wounded smile touched his mouth. I believe you. Good. She turned away. At the bottom of the steps, Shen Yu waited beneath an umbrella. He held it out without comment. An Xue took the space beside him. Zhao Ming watched. An Xue felt his gaze and did not turn back. Shen Yu angled the umbrella so the rain missed her shoulder and struck his own. "Your alliance appears lively," he said. "Jealous?" The word slipped out before she considered it. Shen Yu looked at her. For once his fan was absent, his expression unhidden. "Careful, Lady N, I answer honest questions honestly." And Xu's heart moved in a way that irritated her. "Then I withdraw the question. A strategic retreat. A necessary one." He smiled, but it faded quickly. "There is something you need to see." He led her to a side corridor where no palace servants lingered. From his sleeve, he took a small object wrapped in black cloth. When he opened it, An Xue saw a seal. Dark jade, cracked along one edge, carved with the character Shen. "My brother's," Shen Yu said. An Xue looked up. "Where did you find it?" "On Wei Guang." The rain seemed to hush. Shen Yu's voice stayed even, but the hand holding the seal did not. "He had it hidden in his boot. He says he found it among old evidence after the palace fire. I think he kept it because someone told him to destroy everything else." An Xue touched the cracked edge gently. "Your brother's case and the Northern Ledger are connected." "Yes." "And my first death." Shen Yu's gaze sharpened. She had not meant to say that much. But after the inquiry, after Rulan's bargain, after Zhao Ming's public request, the wall around her old life had thinned. Shen Yu did not ask what she meant. He only said, "The case is older than your engagement, older than the forged ledger, older than the banquet." And Xue looked toward the Phoenix Hall roofs, where Empress Wei had returned behind carved doors and loyal attendants. "Then Book 2 is not over," she said softly. Shen Yu's mouth curved. "No." Across the courtyard, Zhao Ming stood under the eaves, watching the rain fall between him and the woman he had once thought would always wait. And Xue did not wait. She walked beside Shen Yu through the palace corridor, carrying an alliance she had chosen, evidence she had earned, and a cracked jade seal that proved the conspiracy beneath her second life was deeper than one prince's betrayal. That night, the capital argued over what to call her. Rejected bride. Dangerous daughter. Future power. And Xue sat at her desk and wrote the first line of a new evidence ledger. Not for Zhao Ming. Not for revenge alone. For every truth that had arrived too late in her first life. This time, she would arrive first,